Hey there, it's Kelly O'Connell with Knockout Podcasts, and I hope you're well. I had an idea for an article, podcast. Joe Biden must be impeached while aftermath remains uncertain, and it has to do with his decision-making, which came out in sessions today in hearings in D.C. that despite receiving repeated input that he should not leave the Kabul area, Afghanistan, without leaving troops behind, he went ahead and did it anyway. So my thinking is he's either extremely willful and doesn't care, or he's crazy. He's lost it, and I think probably both are true. So I come to the conclusion that Biden doesn't care about the suffering or lives of American citizens or allies, which is really shocking to hear from a president. So let's get into this thing. A fiery political advocate or crazed humanistic zealot are unfit for elected office. This explains why both Biden and Pelosi's self-righteous tenures are pompous failures. Instead, what's needed is a different kind of personality who appears to be fading away, the statesman. In considering history's great leaders, the past is littered with mad partisans utterly convinced they own the secret blueprint of the universe. And I would include in that Stalin, Lenin, and Mao, who killed a lot of people and didn't really achieve anything in the long run. Instead, all of these prejudiced souls either birthed failed revolutions or died trying, at enormous cost to their societies. And I believe they said that Mao may have killed as many as 76 million people. Now, for example, Joe Biden ignored his generals while leaving Afghanistan, which will cost perhaps hundreds of thousands of lives, including Americans. He must be impeached even if Kamala is untenable. She is not functional as a leader. Sadly, if Biden's impetuous folly proves anything, it's that he doesn't care about the suffering or lives of American citizens or allies, and that's baleful. Very, very bad. Now, consider this. Think about this. Think about tyrannies, famous tyrannies. Around tyranny are certain historical hallmarks. First, the need to relax or abolish the rule of law. And they say what made America great was the rule of law so that we wouldn't have tyrants. Second, an indifference to human suffering or death, because that comes with tyranny. Third, the concept that these leaders are great men or women under no rules, given their purity of spirit and need for freedom. Now remember all these signs. They got rid of religion in these communist countries, and then they had these giant signs of the Stalins and the Maos that turned them into a cult, them into a god. Fourth, that republicanism is too costly, being the kind of government with checks and balances which cannot be risked. Fifth, that a new way of life on earth is being established that will end all suffering, want, greed, and wars, etc. But consider how leaders act when they are convinced that they are called to master humanity. Overall, the main trait of leftist masters is overwhelming incompetence. And this is true. Think about it. Every great socialist or Marxist leader is a failed person, is a failed leader. Consider Joe Stalin, a clinically paranoid man without leadership training who organized the Great Purge, targeting independent farmers, the kulaks, and his own Communist Party, resulting in 5 million deaths. So because Stalin was so paranoid, what he did is he found anybody that was popular, anybody that could be a threat to him, and he'd have him killed. Not to be outdone, equally untrained Chairman Mao's great leap forward communalized farms, resulting in 40 million deaths. So the interesting thing about Chairman Mao, he had studied Marx, and Marx encouraged communism or communalism. But he doesn't really explain how it's going to work. So Mao, being a good Marxist, he got all of these farmers and he told them, you have to leave your farms and come together in these groups, and then we're going to farm on a large scale. And it never worked, and analysts consider 40 million deaths from the ensuing famines and from those who didn't cooperate, who were murdered. 40 million people. Even for China, that's a lot of people. Now consider both leaders murdered their own party officials and pursued ethnic cleansing, creating terror, torture, and murder. But how did either man serve as society? Let me introduce here, and I've got a link. If you search for it, you can find it in its PDF form for free. Carl Schmitt, in his Theory of the Partisan, which comes from a couple of speeches he gave, uses Clausewitz's famous book Vom Krieg on War, writing, its formula for war as the continuation of politics is the theory of the partisan in a nutshell. This logic would be taken to its limits by Lenin and Mao Zedong, Chairman Mao. And so think about this. The American way of politics is to run a candidate, and then after the vote is not, manipulated. The vote doesn't have laws around it that are changed to make it easier to cheat. After the vote is counted, then that's it. Then we allow those people to go into leadership, and we don't do that anymore. And I think the turning point was when Trump came into office. He was such a threat to the left that they decided before he ever got into office that they would start accusing him of corruption. And so Hillary Clinton got a lawyer who worked for her and said, I want you to go to the government and tell them that you have discovered that Trump is colluding with the Russians. And he did that, and they opened this investigation that went on for years. And if Robert Barr hadn't become Attorney General, it'd still be going on right now. They were never going to end it, and they were just looking for dirt on Trump. And Robert Mueller is just an incompetent hack. And I don't care if he was in the military. He was terrible. He was a tool of tyranny for these Democrats. So as an elected leader, one cannot fairly pursue Marxist goals while serving constituents for several reasons. First, a communist is only dedicated to the Holy Revolution, but this means rejecting established democratic rules or norms. Second, the pompous, condescending, and dismissive nature of socialist sloganeering insults and antagonizes the average person. Listen to Nancy Pelosi sometime and the terrible things that she says, or AOC. It's full of half-truths and lies and generalizations, and these people are up there working on their own theories, on their own vision to get socialism started, but that's not why they were hired. Nobody in America, a small group of people in America want there to be socialism. So how are they representing the left, the leftover group, the vast majority, the other 90%? Now, third, leftism is broadly lawless, such that any graft or dishonesty is considered irrelevant by the participants and fitting pay for their sacrifices. So Nancy Pelosi has made hundreds of millions of dollars. And it's speculated that it's all come out of these Silicon Valley insider trades. Now, this is well illustrated by Biden's own scofflaw son, Hunter, who's raked in millions in international graft for the Biden crime family, making deals with various countries. And, with China, with Russia, with Ukraine, some of our worst enemies, they have dirt on Biden, so he can't really do anything to represent America because he's too busy being worried about getting smoked out. Now, as I said, San Francisco's Nancy Pelosi amassed hundreds of millions a suspected result of Silicon Valley insider trading, and yet recall how regularly Pelosi herself presents herself as blissfully superior to any naysayers, even sassing the newly elected President Trump to his face. Go and find the video where it shows the first meeting in the White House, and Nancy is so rude to him, and she thinks she's a better person than other people. Maybe that's true of all these politicians, but she's righteous. She's morally superior. She would go and attack capitalism too, and yet at the same time twist capitalism so she could make millions out of it. And I think that's probably a joke to a lot of these leftists. Is scornful, greedy, and vindictive Nancy really an example of the founder's model of servant leadership? I mean, of course not. The question answers itself. America is now awash in socialist acolytes, followers, exceedingly aggrieved partisans, biased people who cannot imagine being mistaken. Recall how ignoramus AOC sabotaged an Amazon hub in Queens, New York City, that Jeff Bezos was very excited to build, which would have benefited her city with billions in salaries, commerce, and tax. She personally attacked it and went after it and blocked it. Later, she celebrated. Her self-aggrandizing attack on capitalism was a study in economic illiteracy. That business undertaking would have not have harmed people. It would have helped New York, especially right before the COVID. AOC then recently attended a Met Gala wearing a white dress with red lettering stating "Tax the Rich." I mean, they're so retarded. Tone-deaf Joe Biden demands higher taxes and insisting IRS employees be doubled, stating "pay your fair share," while owing $500,000 himself. Can you believe that? But is anyone surprised despite his wealth resulting from Hunter's illegal deals? In fact, leftists would rather shrink the economy while increasing rates to increase the punitive sting. They want to shrink the economy to make us more malleable, more supple towards moving towards socialism. And at the same time, they want to increase taxation rates. So there's two ways to grow your tax base. One way is to increase the taxes. The other way is to grow the economy. They want to shrink the economy and increase tax rates. That's crazy. And that shows you that they don't like people. I think Joe Biden, having left all those allies and Americans in Kabul, hates people. You know, they say he is both easygoing and very combative, defensive, and they say he's much more defensive than he is easygoing, that's just a mask that he wears. A time of great testing is upon us, my friends. Since Joe Biden's military advised him to leave the troops behind, and he stubbornly refused, he's either incompetent or absurdly willful and must be removed. I mean, do you think the guy's competent? Immediately, we need to do this. Sadly, VP Kamala might be the one government employee more incompetent than a demented president. As John Durham's investigation continues, we now know Hillary paid for the Russia investigation, and now other shoes must fall. Now, this is probably America's last chance to root out the communist horde in D.C., and cannot be delayed any longer. If Republicans can win back the House, as seems likely, and the Senate, which would be ideal, we can start rooting out the termites, cockroaches, and rats from the White House, especially Democrats, and begin to heal our beleaguered nation. Contra, without this, the American experiment, a land blessed by our constitutionally established democratic republic, is doomed, and so are we the people. Fiat lux, let there be light. And that's the original translation from Genesis, fiat lux, let there be light. All right, guys, so thanks for tuning in. I really enjoy hanging out with you. Even though it's episodic, I do it at one time, you listen at another, which is different from radio, live radio, which I used to do. But it's more of a challenge, but it's more rewarding in a sense, you know. Now let me get you the thing that you may have come for, which is weird news. All right, so the first story and the second story are connected. The first story is really astounding when you hear the details. A man and a woman, a man 30 and a woman 27, were arrested after cops found 21 kilograms of carfentanil. Carfentanil. C-A-R-F-E-N-T, carfent, A-N-I-L, carfentanil, enough to kill 50 million people. The powerful sedative, get this, is 100 times more potent than fentanyl. And fentanyl itself is 100 times more powerful than heroin. So it's 1,000 times more powerful than heroin, I guess. Andres Jesus Morales, 30, and 27-year-old Christine Ponce were arrested by police in Southern California at a residential home. And they found 21 kilograms of this drug. And the synthetic opioid is 100 times more potent than fentanyl and is typically used, listen to this, typically used to sedate elephants and other large mammals. So these two people were charged with 4 felonies for possession, for sales of fentanyl, cocaine, and heroin. Both pleaded guilty during an arraignment, being held without bail. Now that's interesting, isn't it? They're due to appear in court again in November 9th. And what happens, though, when you've got a situation, and I know this from living in the part of the country that I do, if you get caught with drugs by the police, and it's from the cartel, and I mean basically everything comes from the cartel in this part of the country, then you owe them for that. Even though you didn't mean to get caught, maybe it's not your fault, and so you have to pay them off. That's the theory they're operating under. So carfentanil is so powerful that it's fatal at a nanogram level, and veterinarians wear protective gear while handling it to avoid exposure. The amount seized is enough to kill 50 million people if it was mixed with other drugs. And cops in Riverside County discovered this while getting a search warrant to a Paris home. And there was also 4 kilograms of cocaine and 1 kilogram of heroin. Now here is the interesting thing. I'm looking at a picture, and this is in the Daily Mail, by the way, and the date on this is September 24th. All right, so I'm looking at this, the amount of product that it would take to kill. Heroin, it looks like a handful. Fentanyl, it looks like maybe 50 grains of salt, kind of a size thing. Well, carfentanil, the amount to kill you, it looks like it's about the third of the size of a pinhead, or maybe half the size of a pinhead to kill you. So that's why it's so deadly. And so Riverside County Officer Ryan J. Railsback said dealers sometimes lace drugs such as heroin or cocaine with synthetic opioids to give users a stronger buzz. When the dealers get the measurement just right, they're likely to have a satisfied and repeat customer. And he says it would be bad business if they're trying to kill off all your clients, but they aren't trying to kill them off. They're trying to bring them back. So it's a delicate measuring act, obviously. A miscalculation can cost users their lives. And it's beyond playing with fire. They compare it to literally playing on the surface of the sun when it comes to the amount. Because the amount of fentanyl you need to kill somebody is so small. And then this other drug is even more. And so people are dying, and the officers believe that they've saved lives. And, quote, our detectives do feel like they're making a dent, especially when you're dealing with fentanyl or a derivative. Every bit you get off the street is one less overdose, one less death penalty. So, all right, what's related to it? All right, you remember the guy named Michael? K. Williams. You may not remember his name, but you remember if you saw The Wire, which is considered to be the greatest series in the history of cable, that he had died the other day. So, a 54-year-old guy, he ingested a cocktail of fentanyl-laced heroin and cocaine. Now, did he know there was fentanyl in it? He may have. He was in his luxury Brooklyn penthouse and was found by his nephew face down unconscious. And they've ruled it an accidental overdose. But he had said that he had struggled with addiction through his life, and he was surprised that he hadn't died, and now he's dead. So they're looking for the dealer, and they would like to charge him with murder. Now, he was best known for his role in The Wire. He was Omar Little, and the series ends with him getting killed by this little kid. And I think Omar in the series is a gay guy, but he's got he's a hood, he's a thug, but he's got a lot of style. And the thing that made him distinctive is he had this scar that went down the center of his, almost from his hairline down to his nose. And it really made him, it gave him a sense of authenticity. But he was a great actor. And he was also in, and that's, The Wire was from 2002 to 2008. And he was also in Lovecraft Country, and he was nominated for an Emmy. And so he's gone, and I got one more story to tell you, but his quote was, "It was just a matter of time before I got caught, and my business ended up on the cover of a tabloid, or I went to jail, or worse, I ended up dead. When I look back on it now, I don't know how I didn't end up in a body bag," and he ended up in a body bag. So, so it says here that more than 83,000 people lost their lives to drug-related overdoses in the year-long period up to July 2021. So here's my third story is, I had a friend, and the friend was found dead of an overdose. And he was a guy who he was quite a bit younger than me. I was kind of trying to mentor him and get him out of all this. But he had used a lot of drugs, and he had taken, I'm trying to remember what he had, I think Xanax. They call it a Xanax bar. And because of the way that drugs travel across the border, it's unlimited now, the amount that they can move, because the Border Patrol is so distracted. They can't really stop anything, and so they're getting massive amounts of product in here. Now, anybody who's taking drugs really doesn't know if there might be fentanyl or this other drug in there, so be careful. Anyway, Kelly O'Connell and Knockout Podcasting, thank you so much for joining me. Hope you have a nice night. Give me a thumbs up or at least subscribe, and I'll catch you on the flip side tomorrow. Good night.